This is the cheat sheet version. One antagonist.
It's come to good
I want to
use.
do it from when it's already on.
Okay.
Otherwise, I would Sacco.
Okay, we're live. You have to mute it.
Ganzburg. What was the other construction? But Cashman is the Russian.
Okay.
Now that you need it, you can critique it.
It's always fun to do it that way. Okay, so we'll start with a story that the Frierdiker Rebbe tells that he heard from the Rebbe Maharash. There were two Hasidim of the Alter Rebbe. They had seen the Mezritcher Magid, so they were from the older Hasidim. The Rebbe Maharash says they were Bali Madrega. They were special. They've gotten somewhere in their Avodas Hashem. They had not only a Hasagan, not only they understood the Alter Rebbe, they also had a Hakara in the Alter Rebbe, which means sort of like a feeling in the Alter Rebbe. They were able to get him, so to speak, if you could say that. Nevertheless, even though they were both great Hasidim, they both had two different ways in serving Hashem. By one of them, the first thing was to do what the Rebbe said, and then afterwards he would try to understand. In other words, his Aveda and his connection to the Rebbe and the Hasidus that he learned from the Rebbe was first do the bottom line, and then try to get there emotionally, intellectually, try to get there also. The other Chassid went the other way around. First he had to understand everything, he had to get it, and then he went and he did it properly via Chassid. One time, the Alter Rebbe sent a shliach. They both lived next to Liozne. The Alter Rebbe sent a shliach to both of them, that asking them for money. So the shliach comes to the first one, the one who does first and then understands, and he tells him the Alter Rebbe asked for money. So the chassid asks, how much did the Alter Rebbe ask for? So he says, the Rebbe didn't say. So the chassid took all the money that he had in his house, gave it to him, told him, bring it to the Alter Rebbe. Then the shliach came to the second chassid, told him the same thing. The Rebbe asked for money. He asked him how much. He said, I don't know. The Rebbe didn't specify. So he said, okay, tomorrow in Mitzvah Hashem, I'll go to Liozne. I'll ask the Rebbe how much he needs, and whatever amount he tells me, that's how much I'll give him. The shliach came back to the Alter Rebbe, and he put the bundles down on the table. And the Alter Rebbe asked, where's the money from the other one? So he told him what the second chassid answered him. The Alter Rebbe put his head on his hands, and he went into Advekus. And then he said, is this going to be Lifnei HaMaisa or Lacher Maisa? Is he going to bring the money before it happens or after it happens? The next morning, early in the morning, before he even had a chance to daven, the first chassid who does first and then asks came to Lozne, came to the Alter Rebbe. It doesn't say why. I'm not sure why he came. Maybe he came to ask how much the Alter Rebbe wanted from the money that he had already sent. It doesn't say clearly why. But he came to the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe told him, you have to travel out. So he went right away back to his town. He sold everything that he was able to sell. Whatever he could pack on his wagon, he put on his wagon. He took his whole family with him, and he set out towards Lozne. The Alter Rebbe said, you have to go out, you have to journey out, so he's journeying out. On his way, it was in the summer, when you have these thunderstorms that just show up out of nowhere. So suddenly the sky turned dark, and the rain poured for like 15 minutes, a tremendous rain, a torrential downpour. And then it stopped, and he continued on to the Alter Rebbe. In the meantime, the second chassid, the one who first tries to understand and then does what the Rebbe said, he got up in the morning. He said, first, let's daven. We'll daven v'sedaf to Zion. And when I'm finished davening by Arichis, like 12, 1 o'clock, I'll go out to the Alter Rebbe. While that rain was coming down, a bolt of lightning struck. It hit one of the houses on the block of these two Hasidim, and the entire block burned down. And he was barely able to save his family. All of his property was completely destroyed. Says the chassid who the Alter Rebbe first got him to get all of his cash out, and then also all of his belongings out, ended up saving his rechush. The second chassid who the Alter Rebbe asked the same thing of him, so that he could have the same result, but he first wanted to understand what the Alter Rebbe wanted, and get it in his inside and feel it in his whole heart, and then he'll do what the Alter Rebbe said. He ended up losing all of his property. And the Rebbe Maharash concludes the story by saying this is the difference between listening and listening. There's listening like this and listening like that. And the Frierdiker Rebbe concludes the story by saying that just like it's important to learn Chassidus, it's important also to learn this story. This story has to be learned so that we could implement it in our lives. And Ulei Shleima, they were because they both had a hakar and the Alter Rebbe.
Why was one being punished as it?
It's not that he was being punished.
He wasn't saved.
He wasn't saved from Exeda. And the that the proper Aveda, that doing what the Rebbe wants first is not only in time, is not only doing it earlier and then asking, it's also putting the priority. Earlier could also mean earlier in priority. That by Hasidim, the priority has to be in doing what the Rebbe says. And when you learn Hasidus, it has to bring to such a situation by a person that he should always put what the Rebbe says first. So I'm hoping that our learning of Hasidus will turn us into such Hasidim that we do what the Rebbe wants, but it's not enough that we do what the Rebbe wants. We're learning his Hasidus. We're trying to understand the Rebbe's Torah and feel it in our hearts, but first is doing what the Rebbe wants, and then afterwards we're going to learn. So this Maimer, the Rebbe said for Yud Aleph Nissan. I'm told that on Yud Aleph Nissan, nobody knew that it was the Rebbe's birthday in the early years. I don't know if anybody heard this, but the Rebbe used to call in a few Hasidim into his room, Rabbi Yoel among them, I think, and he used to say a Maimer. Nobody knew why. Nobody knew it was the Rebbe's Yom Haledes Bechlal. It was only in the Chavs, I think it was in the early Chavs that the Rebbe started Fabrengen on Yud Aleph Nissan. You could listen to the first Yud Aleph Nissan Fabrengen. The Rebbe talks about the Inyan of Yom Haledes. So the Rebbe turned Yud Aleph Nissan into a Yom Tov for Hasidim. It's not pshat that we, it's a thing that we have a special feeling towards because of our Abba to the Rebbe, but the Rebbe himself turned Yud Aleph Nissan into a very big Yom Tov. This is the 120. The Shnas HaMe'ah, everybody's making a big deal about it. So it's nice. It's very nice that it came out that we're starting this year and the days leading up to Yud Aleph Nissan, and we'll start with the Yud Aleph Nissan Maimer. So this is a Maimer Beyom Ashtei Asar Yom that the Rebbe said on Yud Aleph Nissan Tafshin Lamed Aleph, and he was Magia the Maimer and gave it to print in Tafshin Mem Tes. So Shaykh, some of the people in the room were actually by the Rebbe when the Rebbe said the Maimer. So the Maimer starts like this. It says in the pasuk, Beyom Ashtei Asar Yom Nasi Livnei Asher. On the 11th day, the Nasi that brought his karbanis for the Chanukas HaMishkan was the Nasi from the Shevet of Asher. Right? The Nasim all brought their karbanis and their gifts to the Mishkan when the Mishkan was completed, and they told Moshe that they want to bring it to the Eibishter. Moshe Rabbeinu seemed to think that it was a good idea, but he said, Hagam, it's very nice that you want to bring karbanis to the Eibishter. We have to find out if the Eibishter wants you to bring these karbanis. So first, let me go to the Eibishter and ask him what should be done. And the Eibishter answered that the Nasim Shataka bring their karbanis, and the Seder is going to be each day another Nasi is going to bring his carbon. On the 11th day of Nissan, the Rebbe's birthday, the Nasi who brought the carbon that day was the Nasi of Asher. The Issa b'Medrash says on the Medrash that Kol Hashvatim l'Shem Gulasan Shal Yisrael l'Shem Shivchan Nikru Shmeisa. All of the Shvatim were named for the Geula of the Yidden and for the praise of the Yidden. And Asher, the Medrash explains, V'Asher Nikra Shmei l'Shem Gulasan Shal Yisrael. The name Asher, which Leah gave, Zilpah, Leah's servant, gave birth to Asher, and when he was born, so Leah declared, what's the pasuk? Vatikra Shmei Asher ki yishruni banis. All of the women are going to praise me, or Asher is from the lashon of happiness, but it's like happiness, like in a praising way, where you say this person has happiness. So the women are all going to praise me and say that I am happy because I had another child. So Asher is chat happiness. Now, this same idea of happiness has to do to Geula. Like it says in the pasuk in the Nevuah of Malachi, where he describes how the Eibishter is going to bring the Yidden back close to him. So the Navi says, all of the nations of the world are going to declare your happiness, the happiness of the Yidden. Why? Because then when Mashiach comes, that at that time everybody's going to be able to see the way you are a land that the Eibishter desires. So the Yidden in this pasuk are being compared to a land that the Eibishter desires. So the Geula we see from this pasuk is connected with the idea of Asher, with the idea of happiness for the Yidden. Well, Hashem Shivcha, the Medrash also said that the names of the Shvatim are connected to the praise of the Yidden. Where do we see that? Like we see that the word Asher, like we say, Ashrei ha'am shekachaloi, Ashrei ha'am she'asher melikav. It says, when it get to the Yidden, that happy are they, or praise be given to they, the nation, that this is to them. In other words, that what? Ashrei ha'am she'asher melikav. That happy and praiseworthy is the nation that the Eibishter is their God. Ein Yishurin shel Yisrael. the happiness of Yidden is only in this, Elal Shabachru B'Hakadosh Baruch Hu, that they chose the Eibishter Lies Lahem Lelikim. They chose the Eibishter to be their Eibishter. The Hakadosh Baruch Hu Bachar Behem Lies Le'La'am Skula. And the Eibishter, on his part, chose the Yidden to be his treasured nation. Ulefichach, and therefore, K'sheba Nasi Asher Lahakriv, when the Nasi of Asher came to bring his carbon, and the Medrash just explained to us that Asher, what does he bring out? What does his name signify? That the Yidden are happy with the fact that they chose the Eibishter, so therefore he could korbanoi al shem al shem habchir shabachar hakadosh baruch hu b'yisrael kolomes. Excuse me. The Medrash says that it was chosen for the fact that the Eibishter chose the Yidden. So his carbon was brought because in order to bring out that idea, or at least to signify that idea, that the Eibishter chose the Yidden from all of the other nations. Like it says in the pasuk. I'm sorry.
I mean, that's all well and good, but Asher was exempt. What happened to the others before that?
The names of the other Shvatim, how they're connected to the Gola.
Yeah.
It says in the Medrash. It says in the Medrash, but Rebbe doesn't quote it here. I didn't look in the Medrash inside. Be geschmack taka to see each one how their name is connected to the Gola.
It's not because I mean you're going to the end.
Yeah.
Well, this was said on Yud Nissan.
Yeah, I understand that, but but something has to be connected between all of them.
Absolutely.
You can't just say Asher, admit them all along comes Asher and he makes everybody happy. Well, what happened beforehand? Everybody was happy. Everybody was connected to the understanding. This was after.
Oh no! So each one of them is connected to the goal and is connected to the praise of the Yidden. But Asher is specifically connected to this idea that the Eibishter chose the Yidden. That is specific to Asher. Asher means that the Eibishter chose the Yidden. Okay. Okay. Like it says in the pasuk, Hashem, that the Eibishter chose you, the Yidden, to be his treasured nation. Okay. The Rebbe, a few things is bothering the Rebbe in this Medrash that seem to not add up exactly. The Rebbe asks, in the beginning of the Medrash, he says, let's look carefully at the words of the Medrash. He says, what's the happiness of the Yidden? The fact that they chose the Eibishter, to be their Eibishter. So the Rebbe says, what's the Iker over here? Where does the main happiness come from? And where does the main praise come from? From the fact that the Yidden chose the Eibishter. And then he continues, it's almost as if he adds on, and the Eibishter also chose the Yidden. But that's like it's like we're continuing something that's not the main point. Also from the pasuk, the Rebbe points out in the heart from the pasuk that he chooses, Asher Yom Shekachale Asher Yom Hashem Elikov, that the Eibishter is their Eibishter. So in other words, that we chose the Eibishter to be our Eibishter, not that the Eibishter chose us to be his nation. So the main point seems to be, earlier in the Medrash, that's what's so special over here, that the Eibishter, that the Yidden chose the Eibishter. This, that the Eibishter chose the Yidden, is like an added thing. Well, however, if we continue inside of the Medrash, we look a little further in the Medrash, he says, why did he bring his carbon connected to his name? And over there, what does he put the emphasis on? His carbon was to bring out the point, or was after this idea for this concept, that the Eibishter chose the Yidden. So Rebbe asks, which one is it? From the Medrash, we're getting mixed messages. In the beginning, when he's describing what's Asher, what's so special about the Yidden, that they chose the Eibishter, and from the end, it says that why did Asher bring his carbon? In order to celebrate, to bring out this idea that the Eibishter chose the Yidden. So which one is it?
It's just to tell you what Asher means. You don't have to take the actual context of that pasuk, which talks about the Yidden choosing the Eibishter. We just want to determine Asher means happy. So why are we taking the whole pasuk in its full context and making it not understandable? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but that was a question coming from somewhere else. But let's discuss the pasuk first. Asher Yom Shekachale is coming to show how the name Asher is connected to something that's praiseworthy about the Yidden.
Or also Asher, happy.
Ashrei happy, but it's
Right.
the name of Asher.
Right.
So this is how Asher was named. We said that all of the Shvatim were named to bring out something special about the Yidden, Shivchan Shel Yisrael, the praiseworthiness of the Yidden.
Right.
So he brings this pasuk where we see that the pasuk uses Ashrei, which is Melashin Asher,
Right.
to bring out the praiseworthy. Now, what's the praiseworthiness of the Yidden? That they chose the Eibishter. That the Eibishter is their Eibishter.
Right.
So that's the central idea. This idea that the Eibishter also chose the Yidden is an addition. It's a nicer. However, when the Medrash comes to say, so what did Asher have in mind when he brought his carbon? What were his kavanas when he brought the carbon? Was that the Eibishter chose the Yidden. So which one is it? What's the main idea over here? And we also have to understand that the Bechira is shaykh dafke b'shnei dvarim sheshneim shavim. We're saying over here that the Yidden chose the Eibishter and the Eibishter chose the Yidden. What's the idea of Bechira? The idea is that you have two things. There's no reason for you to choose one over the other. For example, if you have a choice between a good car, a new car, and an old car, it's not a choice, assuming that somebody's going to give them to you for free. The financial aspect doesn't come into play over here. So it's not a choice. Any normal person who has even the smallest amount of logic and reasoning will be forced to take the new car. It's not a choice. A choice can be in one of two situations. Either if it's a situation with two things that are absolutely and completely equal, and you cannot find any difference between them, and you choose one of those objects or one of those things. Why did you choose it? Why did you choose it? There's no reason for it. So it's explained in many places in Chassidus that it came from Bechira. You chose it. There's something deeper than reasoning, deeper than I chose it for this reason or for that reason. I chose it because I chose it. I wanted this one and not the other one. That's what I wanted. Or you could also have another form of choice where you have two things that are not equal, but each one of them has a certain advantage. And you say you could only get one of them. So now you have to make a choice. Decide which one you're going to have, this one or the other one. But when it comes to the Eibishter, how could you use this expression, this lashon that the Yidden had Bechira, chose the Eibishter? In English, there isn't a specific word for Bechira. So we use the same words to say the idea that the Yidden decided, said we're going to accept the Eibishter upon us to be Eibishter. You would use the word choice also. But in Lashon Kodesh, you wouldn't use Bechira for that. Bechira has a very specific meaning. When there's two things that either there's no advantage one over the other and you choose one of your own free will, or the other one is if you could only have one of two, each one with its own advantage, and you decide, okay, I'll take this one. This one is more important to me. But over here, it's not a choice. It's an action. The Yidden did accept the Eibishter, but it's not a vote of a choice over here. There's nothing to choose between the two. One is Eibishter, is emes, is eternity, and the other one is a joke. It's a lie. It's a childish thing. Where's the choice over here? In the same way, the other way around, we say that the Eibishter chose the Yidden. How's that a choice? Deb asks. The Yidden are higher and be'ein aroich in an incomparable way. In other words, leagues higher than the other nations. What is this that the Medrash says that the Eibishter chose the Yidden? It's not a choice. And the Rebbe says at the end that maybe you're going to answer me that taka when it comes to neshamis. The neshamis of the Yidden are connected to Kedusha. They have b'nei b'chei Yisrael, the Eibishter's child. They're connected to the essence of the Eibishter. So over there's taka no choice. But when it comes to the bodies, the body of Yidden, the body of a goy are similar. So maybe that's the bechira. And taka, that's what the Alter Rebbe says, that the bechira was taka in the bodies. Even this that it says in Tanya, the choice of the Eibishter and the Yidden, who haguf hachumri, this refers to not to the neshama, because over there there's taka no choice, like we pointed out, but it's referring to the body. The Eibishter chose our physical bodies, which our physical body seems to be similar in its material. It seems to be similar to the bodies of the nations of the world. Right? You take a Jewish body and the body of a goy, you put it under a microscope, you examine it biologically, physiologically, in any other method, the scientific, observable way that you could look, you can't tell the difference. So therefore, you could use the term bechira because they seem to be the same. However, Tzarech Bir says that this is not we still need an additional explanation over here. To us, it's a good explanation why it's Bechira. Because looking at it from our point of view and our terms of understanding and of knowing things, the body of a Yid and the body of a Goy are taka the same. But if you're looking at it, who did the Bechira over here? It wasn't us that did the Bechira. We shouldn't look at it from our point of view. We should be looking at it from the Eibishter's point of view. He's the one who's doing the choosing. From his point of view, he could see the truth. That even when it comes to the physical body of a Yid is also much higher than the physical body of a Goy. So again, the same question, how do we say Bechira that the Eibishter chose? This idea, we're getting already into a very Rebbe point. In Bechlal, there's a few things that we should say. The Rebbe's Mamarim, for the most part, they follow a certain, the Mugadik Mamarim, they follow a certain structure. The beginning of the Maimer is mostly bringing down from Mamarim of the Rebbeim who came before the Rebbe. And then the Rebbe goes into what you could call an intellectual haskaladika discussion, where the Rebbe brings out 1, 2, or 3 more levels of depth in the ideas that he brought from the Rebbeim before him. And then the Rebbe finishes, as I say, with a bomb in Avodas Hashem, with a point that really hits you. You feel it inside in Avodas Hashem, a message that's particular specifically to our generation, something that we could get, something that speaks to us. And something that we can apply to our life. And many of the themes of the Rebbe, or I should say, some of the common themes in the Rebbe's Ma'amorim is Atzmos, not Atzilus and Seviv Klam and Keser and all the other things. The Rebbe puts a tremendous focus on Atzmos, and the Rebbe puts a tremendous focus on Bittul, or you could say the connection of a Yid to Atzmos, which is Bittul. We'll see weiter in this Maimer. So you could call it Bittul, or you could call it the connection of a Yid to Atzmos, and the idea of Dira B'Tachtenim, of creating a dwelling place for the Eibishter down here in this world. And you could already see from the beginning, from the opening of the Maimer, we have over here already, we're going in that direction, where the Rebbe already had a whole discussion to point out to us that even the body of a Yid is holy. We shouldn't think that those Yidden who have a connection to Neshama Zachin, they feel their Neshama, they're flying high, they feel a love and a fear to the Eibishter, and they can comprehend, they can sense godliness, just like we can sense physical things. So Neshama is over there, that's connected to the Eibishter. The Rebbe points out the body of a Yid is holy. The body of a Yid is connected to the Eibishter, and the body of the Yid is what the Eibishter chose. The Neshama is connected to the Eibishter, but not at the same deep level of the body of a Yid. Because Bechira, choice, comes from a much deeper place in the Eibishter. So the body of the Yid is even more connected to the Eibishter. It's a very Rebbe vart, and we see it already right away in the beginning of the Maimer. Just to give a few words of explanation, perhaps, on what's so special, and what's taka different on the body, by the body of a Yid, because we taka can't see a difference. So what taka is there an explanation? So on Purim, which we're just coming from Purim, the Rebbe has a sicha in Chela Gimel, where the Rebbe points out that by a goy, what's the idea of his body? The idea of his body is that it's a physical being that is interested in the physical pleasures of the world. And when it can achieve the physical pleasures of the world, so the person is happy. And when it can't achieve the physical pleasures of the world, so the person is unhappy. By a Yid, even though he has a physical body, by him, the idea of a physical body is to bring holiness into the world. Why do I have a physical body? Because the Eibishter wants the Eibishter wants his holiness to come down into the physical world, not only in the spiritual worlds. And that's the true meaning, that's my true identity of my physical body, is something that can bring holiness into this world. So externally, they both look like physical things. We're going to make a comparison between them. They're both physical bodies. But Bepnimius, internally, by the Goy, was is pshat, the physical body, is the pleasures of this world. By the Yid, was is pshat, the physical body, a vessel, a method, a way that I can bring holiness into the physical world. So they're completely different. And the Rebbe isn't mitzayin to this word, but this could give us an understanding, perhaps, and what it means that to the Eibishter, one way that we can understand that to the Eibishter, there's bechlal no comparison even between the body of a Yid and the body of a Goy. So what's this word of a bechira, a choice between them? Okay, so we'll leave this in our head for later. We'll come back to this much later in the Maimer. The Rebbe now brings down a new concept, base. For Yuvan Zeh, we'll be able to understand this behektim by first discussing a whole other sugya. Mashakosov, it says, and this is an Eicha, not sure which who said Perek Gimel Avecha, but whichever Navi it was that said Perek Gimel Anecha. So he goes through a whole bunch of psukim describing the great pain and how they used to forsake us, and then they used to fed us, full of bitterness, v'chulu. And then he finishes towards the end of the Perek. He says a bunch of psukim which say how the Yid is saying, I'm going to come close to the Eibishter. I'm still connected to him. Even though I had all of this pain and the Eibishter punished me so terribly, nevertheless, I'm still connected to the Eibishter. So one of the psukim over there is this pasuk, Chelki Havaya Amra Nafshi. The Yid says that my portion, what am I choosing? What am I connected to? Is to the Eibishter. This is what my soul says. I'm connected to the Eibishter. That's my portion. Okay, that's why I always look towards him to help me from my troubles. So the Medrash teaches this pasuk, Chelki Havaya Amra Nafshi, that a Yid declares that my chelek, what's my portion? What do I want for my portion? I want the Eibishter. So the Medrash gives a mashal on this. Mashal lemelech. So mashal for a king. Shenichnas lemedina. He came to a city. He came with his whole delegation. He was traveling by Sechos, and he came with his whole delegation to the city. And there were various types of ministers. I have no idea of the types of duchsin, Viparchim, and Stratilutin, but there are different levels of ministers. So Chad Omar, so the townspeople see the king and they see the delegation. So they start, circling around them. So Chad Omar, one of the townsfolk says, let me come and invite and get close to this minister, the duchsin, these types of ministers. Chad Omar, another one of the townspeople said, I'm going to come closer and invite over the parchim, the other type of ministers. And another person said, I'm going to bring these types of ministers close to me. I'm going to get close to them. Says the Medrash, there was one bright, intelligent resident of this town. Omar, and what did he say? Ano nasiv malka. I'm not going to take any of these ministers. I'm going to take the king himself. Why am I going to choose the king himself? The kulum is chalfin. The ministers look very impressive. However, they could all be changed in a moment. They could all be switched out. One morning, the idea of a king, we don't have this anymore, but the idea of a king is that he could wake up one morning, fire all of his ministers. The moment before, this guy was in charge of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. The other guy was in charge of the entire economy of the country. One morning, the king wakes up. He doesn't even have to call him in. He sends a messenger. He says, you're no longer the minister. The next guy's the minister. So all of these ministers, they have immense power, but their kulam is chalfin. They can all tomorrow be gone. However, the king, he's never going to change. Therefore, what am I going to choose? He was a smart guy. What am I going to choose? I'm going to choose the king. Going now to the Nimshal, the nations of the world. Some of them, who did they choose to be their getchka? They serve the sun. Some of them serve the moon and other forms of Avodah Zarah. Aval Yisrael, however, the Yidden, they chose the king himself. They only serve the Eibishter himself. And this then is the meaning of the pasuk in Eicha, that the Yid says, I will choose the Eibishter to be my portion. I'm not going to take any of the other ministers. It's a beautiful medrash. However, if we think about it, even for a moment, the Rebbe will do the thinking for us. There are some very obvious questions that we should be asking. The Rebbeim in earlier Mamar already asked Benegeh to this medrash. To Lechura seemingly, we didn't say there was one guy over there who did it. We said that this guy, he was a smart guy, he was wise. Even a baby, never mind that you don't need an adult who's not even smart, even a child, knows that, just look at them. Who's greater, the ministers or the king? The king is greater. You don't have to use seichel b'chlal. Even a katan whose mind isn't fully developed can immediately see that the king is greater. And you naturally, if you have two foods, one of them less good, the other one more good, you go to the better one. Like what's fasta meruba late to fasta. Okay, so you want to tights up. There's the pikchas over here that the other people realized if they get close to the king, they're getting involved with too much. Yeah. So they said, okay, it's a very good word, and the Evetaka brings it down later. We'll get to it. In other words, in what sense are you going to get into trouble with this tafasta meruba?
Well, basically, if you're going to try to get to the king, first of all, that's a very brazen move. Go straight to the king. Let me come first his advisors, and I'll figure out a way how to get to the king. If you don't go straight to the king, then the king can.
So it took this pikach to say that even though
I'll take the risk.
I should take the risk, and that's a pikach. Good, it's not a bad vote. We'll get to it later in the Maimon. So seemingly it should be an obvious choice, and like Tzvi mentioned, and one reason why perhaps it takes a pikris, and the Rebbe Taka we'll get to that reason, and we'll see Taka why it took a pikris. Okay, the second point that the Rebbe asks is like this: V'gam, additionally, even if the various ministers can't be switched out, there's other ways, there's simpler ways to come to the realization, to understand that the king is greater than them. And we'll skip the brackets over here. It's at the end of the ice already. What exactly do we have to come up with this reason that they can all be changed? It sounds like the Medrash is trying to tell us something with this particular reason. You could find 1,000,001 reasons how to express this idea that the king is greater, starting from simply saying the king is greater than them. So the Medrash chose that it's a very specific idea, a very specific concept, that kulam mischalfin, they can all be switched out. What exactly is this idea? Okay. So Gimel on page Kuf. Seemingly, the Rebbe is going to first propose an answer based on this idea that's brought down in Rambam and in other places, that in the earlier generations, in other words, in the generations immediately following Adam Rishon, so those people who served the stars and the various constellations in the sky, they knew very clearly that the hashpah that comes down to the earth through the kechavim u'mazalis, like we see the pasuk itself says, "Mimeged tvois shamesh u'mimeged geresh yirachim." This is in the brachas, I think, for Yosef Atzadik, that his land should be blessed from the sweetness of the harvest that you reap, from the things that the sun causes to grow, and from the sweetness of the things that yirachim, that the moon causes to grow. So we see that all things down here on this world get their hashpah from the heavenly objects, whatever you want to call them. Right? And this is everything in Chassidus is always proved from a pasuk. But if we look at it also with Kashmir Stigah, and when we understand, for example, everything in this world runs on energy, and the entire energy on earth ultimately has its source in the sun. Without the sun, there would be no energy, or very, very little energy down here in the world. So we couldn't have. So it's not only that we rely on energy for electricity, we rely on energy for a lot more. Nothing moves without energy. It would just be basically rock, dead rock. There could be nothing growing. There could be nothing happening on this earth. So we can understand, Pashat, it's very easy to understand this idea that the goodness that we have down here on this world is brought down to us through the kechavim u'mazalos. So these people in the generations very close to Adam Rishon, not too many generations after, the first generations after Adam Rishon, they knew that all of this shefa that comes down to the world through the kechavim u'mazalos, hu lo shehem atzma mashpim. It's not pshat that they themselves have this energy independently, and they're the origin of the energy, and they give it to the world. But rather, they knew it's the Eibishter that's giving this hashpah to the world. But the Eibishter is just utilizing them to bring down the hashpah down into the world. They knew that it's that way. So where then was their mistake? Why did we say that they were serving idols? This was the first mistake that they made in a chain of mistakes that came afterwards. The first mistake was to think this energy, this goodness, the hashpah that the Eibishter gives through the heavenly bodies, it's through their choice. They can't create any energy. They don't have any independent way of neither creating and not even energizing things that already exist. They don't have it. That only comes from the Eibishter. However, the Eibishter chose to give it through them, and now that the Eibishter chose to give it through them, so it's up to them. If they are going to continue and allow this energy that's coming from the Eibishter through them continue to come down into this world. If they want, it's going to come. If they want, it's not. It's not their energy, but they can control whether or not it should ultimately make it to its intended recipient. It's like the mailman. Yeah. Somebody could send you a letter and you have all of the laws in the United States. It's a federal offense for the mailman not to put the letter into the mailbox. But the mailman can decide if he's going to actually put it in your mailbox or not. Right? It doesn't matter that the person who wanted to send you the letter, it's very urgent for him that the letter should get to you, and that the mailman is nothing more than a shliach to send it. It doesn't matter. If he wants, he could decide to throw it out. So they viewed things the same way, that it's all that the Eibishter is sending the energy, and they should give it because that's what the Eibishter wants. However, in the end of the day, they could decide to stop it. They didn't perceive the truth, that they have no choice whatsoever. They are nothing more than an axe in the hand of a stonecutter. This idea of a gazin biyad ha'chetzev is comes from a pasuk I see over in the Ha'ara, but it's explained in many places in Chassidus at length, in other ma'amarim. And the basic idea is that if somebody sees an artsman, a craftsman who created a beautiful stone building, and he did the whole thing by himself. He didn't go to Home Depot to buy the stones. He cut the stones, and then he brought them to location, and then he carved each one, creating beautiful, flowers and other decorations in the stonework. And a person comes across this building and he sees that it's a beautiful building. So what's he going to say? What's going to be his reaction? He's going to say, wow, the axe that built this building is an amazing axe? Of course not. He's going to say that the craftsman who built this building was an amazing craftsman. Why? The craftsman didn't do it. He couldn't do it without the axe. The axe was instrumental over here. So why doesn't he praise the axe? And the answer is given. We could all try to formulate an answer ourselves. We'll go straight to the way it's explained in Chassidus. The answer is because the axe had no choice in how the stone is going to be cut and whether or not the stone will be cut or in how it's going to be cut. It had no say over here. It was nothing more than a tool. It in a way, you could say it contributed something. You could think it contributed something because the craftsman had to use it. But in truth, it didn't. Because all it was a tool that the craftsman utilized to do his work, to create his art. So because it had no choice, when he wanted, he was able to hit the stone, and he wanted to hit it this way to make this shape and that shape. He was able to do it. The axe couldn't get in the way at all. It had no say about nothing about it. So therefore, we don't give any praise to him. And this is what the first generations of idol worshippers didn't get. They thought that the axe does have choice in it. And therefore they bowed down like a chavim umazalis to the stars and to the constellations, and they served them. Because according to the mistake that they made, that the hashpah that the Eibishter gives through the chavim umazalis is by their choice. So they came to the conclusion, it's worthy, it's appropriate to say thank you to them for giving them the hashpah. Not only that, they did it with a lumdus. They were Talmidei Chachamim. They said, if you're sitting in somebody's house and the waiter is pouring wine for you, so we see it's the normal thing. Most people, all decent people, will say thank you to the waiter. Why are you saying thank you to the waiter? It's not his wine. He was hired to do a job over here. So the Gemara expresses it like this: Chamra lemara, take for the wine. You have to thank the master, the owner of the house, the host of the party. Tivusa. However, the fact that he actually brought it over to you and poured it into your glass, that taka belongs l'shakir. That taka you should give to the waiter, and therefore they praised you should praise the waiter. You should say thank you to him, give him a tip or whatever it is. So these idol worshippers, according to the first explanation over here, were very refined people. So it's not right for us. After all, shouldn't we say thank you to the Kechavim Amazalis? They're doing a tremendous job for us. We should say thank you to them. But the Rebbe adds it wasn't all so altruistic and so menschlich and so refined. Vegam. There was also another reason here. There was more of a self-serving reason. Kilafito also. Following in the line of their mistakes, that the stars and the constellations are Bali B'chira, they have free will to decide if they should give the Hashpah. Chashvu, so they figured by this that they're going to serve the Kechavim Mazalas, they're going to get more out of this Hashpah. So it was actually self-serving.
Like tip your waiter.
And he'll give you some free things. Or tip the room service, they'll bring you extra towels. Exactly. So this was the first mistake of the Kechavim Mazalas. And we're out of time, so the time is we're stopping right in the middle of the Inyan. But let's not end with the mistake of the Chavim Mazolos. Let's just end with the focus, with the understanding that the Yidden are wise enough, are smart enough to see through this facade of the sun giving energy to the world and the moon giving energy to the world and all the constellations bringing energy to the world. The Yidden see through this. We don't make this mistake, and we understand that it's Kegazim B'yad HaChetzev. The Eibishter created them, the Eibishter decided to give the Hashpah through them, and they have no choice. It's all the Eibishter acting, just he wants to act through them. We see straight through this, and therefore we serve the Eibishter. To be continued, Amir Hashem.
Oh, yeah. We continue, one.
Every Tuesday.
Ready? Yeah, okay. Cliffhanger.
Thank you.